Welcome to Money Isn't Everything. I'm Mary Wisniewski, Cornerstone Advisors, editor-at-large, and host of the show that explores early-stage ideas that could, if not already, shake up financial services. Today on the show is Keith Armstrong, who, among other things, co-founded a company called Stretch. This is a really interesting conversation because Stretch started out as a neobank for the formerly incarcerated, and it's made a big pivot. And we chat about lessons learned, the nuances of what transactions mean or can mean, and the importance of income opportunities rather than budgeting advice. Here's our convo. Keith, welcome to Money Isn't Everything. It's great to see you again. Thanks for being on the show.
Likewise, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah, well, you have a lot of things to go over, but and I have a lot of things to go over with you. But I thought, of course, the place to begin is to give a little color on something that you co-founded, which really made a splash because you created a neobank for the formerly incarcerated. So let's talk about Stretch.
That was certainly where we started a few years ago. We launched, as you said, a neobank for people who were returning home from incarceration. We were really inspired by a Wall Street Journal article, of all things, that sort of piqued our interest. And as we went out and started, meeting other people who had experienced incarceration and learned about some of the challenges that they face around opening up a bank account and getting access to, let's call it, fair financial services, and some of the challenges with credit identities and access to things like auto loans and such. It was really motivating mission for us, and we worked very closely with our partners at High Note and Sutton Bank to launch a product that could be open using a person, state, or federal prison ID. And that was really the seed of the product and the company where we look to start. And we've evolved a lot since then, and happy to talk about that, but that was where we originally started.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get into the now journey, but I mean, what a fascinating problem to latch onto. And I guess I'm really curious of, like, in your research and creating this, what was one or two surprises that you discovered while trying to serve this audience?
Well, we saw that a lot of people who were returning home from incarceration, at least in the areas we were originally targeting, were living at a transitional home or facility. And these often carry a commercial address, which, when you try to use that address on other consumer banking sites, say Chase or something, it pops up as a red flag as being a commercial address. And so that was one interesting insight we had, and had to work closely with to solve for, was allowing for cars to be mailed to a commercial facility. Um, Additionally, we saw several people opening up Cash App accounts, and yeah, that was one of the reasons that caused us to pivot, where we realized, wow, maybe this isn't such a big problem as we originally thought and had heard from people. Takeaway for me as a founder is, you can read a lot of academic research and even talking with people, but people were still finding ways to get access to financial products like Cash App.
That's really interesting. Why that account?
I mean, every state's different, but when people, at least in Texas, are released from incarceration, broadly speaking, you're given $50 on a paper check, and people would take this check and get it cashed at some location, whether that was like a liquor store or some kind of convenience center, and they would leave with cash, and then they would give these funds to another individual who would be able to send them money electronically into their Cash App account. And so you're seeing just a need to not have cash. You would give it to someone, and they would hold it for you and send you those funds through your Cash App account. That was like a microcosm of activity we were seeing at least within the transitional home that we were working within.
Okay, so they're getting like an account, but what did you discover? Like, oh, but here are some other needs that aren't getting met that are pressing.
What we realized is people wanted to sort of have this pocketing behavior. So they would open an account with us, they would open an account at Cash App. We saw many people opening up Chime accounts eventually too. And they were keeping money in all three. And we could see in the transfer activity money going to Cash App or money being transferred to Chime. So it was an interesting insight for us where you were just seeing people use um, very different accounts for many different things. And we always thought that the account for us could be a hook, and that the ease of opening this account with your prison ID would allow us to offer a wider variety of services. Particularly, one of the areas we were interested in was auto lending. Many people struggle getting access to affordable financing for a vehicle that is used to get them to and from work. I've talked to many people who have to spend hours on a bus, to get to employment, and that can be obviously a huge time suck. And so that was sort of what we originally thought we might be able to fix for people.
And it's so interesting that you said, that they're using all three apps because that's like just something that happens to consumers. It's like you have your main bank account and then you just download a couple of apps. So that seems sort of like it's still true.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, we thought this was a much greater problem than it was, and we just had to respond to the realities that we were seeing on the ground.
Totally. And I want to get into the pivot, but before we do that, I am curious because you mentioned to me previously of like, I mean, obviously you're going to get some head turns and banking circles to say, hey, I'm creating the, I mean, to say the least. But I feel like there's so many stereotypes. There's always so many stereotypes, but one is just like judgment on what people are buying and why they're buying it. And I'm wondering sort of like what you'd see or what you'd feel like either from like financial services circles or like from people, transacting through your product. Like, are there stereotypes that you'd like to break down a bit or
Maybe talk a little bit about our pivot and what we've done with a state DOC in collaboration with their parole team. So we originally launched that consumer program, but we've since have launched a corporate disbursement program where we're able to open up anonymous cards for individuals. And with the particular state organization we were working with, individuals who were randomly selected to participate in this program would receive a card. And as they achieve different milestones, funds would be released automatically onto this card. So some of these milestones included things like one, just activating the card, building up that muscle of digital literacy and going through that process of setting up your account. Next was getting employment. Another was keeping employment. And we had some other milestones where you would receive funds if you complied with electronic monitoring or were participating in these rehabilitative programs. So as funds were released, the agency was really interested in understanding how funds were being used. And one of the first cases we had was an individual who spent about $200 on a pair of sneakers. And that raised a lot of questions internally because some people thought that was really wasteful. And how on earth could someone who was just released from prison spend that much money on a pair of shoes? But what I found really interesting is that you have to look at that transaction within the larger context of a person's life. So what we learned is that this individual is actually buying these sneakers for their niece, who an estranged family member. And so when you have that background in that context, it doesn't look like a wasteful expenditure. It's a gesture, a way to reestablish a relationship. And we had many examples of these. Whether it was observing some expenditures at a Pet Boys or an AutoZone. This was a clue that somebody was uh, fixing up a car so that they could have that to be able to get to and from work. Or, not everything was positive either. We saw in some cases people had transactions declined at a DMV, and we were like, how could the how does this happen? And you see, like, the night before there was like a really large DoorDash expense that cleared. And so, you know, perhaps this is an opportunity for some kind of coaching or intervention, with the individual to support them in cash flow management. So, um, I could go on and on about that, but it's not just looking at how much was spent and at what merchant category. You really have to look at the circumstances of the individual and a lot of sort of soft factors to really get a sense for the why behind their spending.
Yeah, I think that's so important because you can think like, oh, this is obvious, but it's never that obvious unless you really, unless you go discovering the story. And Keith, you're already talking about the pivot, but I know it's more than this. You're expanding in different ways. So yeah, how from Stretch's roots to where you are now, how are you seeing your technology being applied or could be applied?
Yeah, so as we talked, we started off as a neobank for people returning home from incarceration. And I have to give a shout out to a company we integrated with in those early days, Honest Jobs. They do some incredible work helping people who have a felony conviction get matched with employers who actually hire people with this felony conviction. And this was a very distinctive feature that we had integrated with as a means to attract people who had been, recently released from incarceration. So when we started there, we've since have moved towards enabling organizations to launch custom financial incentive programs that reward positive behavior, whatever those behaviors are. So you can apply this to things, whether it's in housing and rewarding people who are making consistent rent payments. You can apply this in small business lending, for example, and releasing different tranches of funding based on, an entrepreneur making tangible progress, whether that is achieving a certain business certification or locking down a potential lease. Uh, Really, whatever may make sense for rewarding progress, we enable individuals to do that either through our API or as a managed service.
I'm kind of curious, and I know it would depend on like what slice we're focused on here, but like who's determining like what are these positive, you know, behaviors? I feel like that's really hard. Well, sometimes it's easy to know, but sometimes it might be quite hard. I feel like it could be quite an art, but give me an example of what that might look like.
And so we really leave that up to the partner to define. So it's whatever milestone you want to set up, that there's a financial value associated with that. And once that's been released and verified in whichever form uh, may make sense for that agency, you can simply make an API call and funds get pushed onto a card. But with respect to the program that we did with the state agency on parole, one of the key things we were looking at was the ability to participate in rehabilitative programming and incentivizing people to um, complete and participate in those, the compliance with electronic monitoring, and of course, securing employment and maintaining that employment as well. These are broadly considered pro-social activities that are forward momentum for an individual who is reintegrating into society after being away for, in some cases, 15, 20 years.
Oh gosh, yes. You are a serial fintech entrepreneur. And I guess I'm just kind of curious of that journey. What makes you latch on to a specific thing? Like, I know you were at Abe and Stretch, but like, yeah, what draws you?
I guess for me personally, I originally started working in housing microfinance in South Africa. So I've just always been really curious where, money and society, particularly vulnerable individuals, sort of intersect with one another. And, when we read about people who were released from incarceration and some of the challenges they faced, not being able to open up a bank account, call it naivete, but we just thought that was a problem we could fix. And you just start walking that entrepreneurial journey, and it takes you in many different directions, some of which you anticipated, much of which you did not. And you really just you have to enjoy it, and not get too upset when things aren't going well, and not get too excited when things are working, and just having a curiosity mindset, and just having fun building stuff with great people. I think that answers your question.
Yeah, it does answer my question. Is there anything you do differently now that you have the lens of time?
For sure. Particularly in this product, I think we weren't honest enough with ourselves about the time it would take for people coming home from incarceration to find employment. I was really excited to do the integration with Honest Jobs, and we did see people able to find employment, but it's still a tremendous problem and challenge that people have to overcome. And so when we would have these accounts stood up, in some cases it would be months before we would see a new deposit hit. So I don't think we were sober enough about the challenges there. And I really wish I had not relied so much on some of the academic literature that talked about the challenges people have getting access to banking. People who want it find a way, as we saw with Cash App. And there was some uniqueness there in that it's very easy to open a Cash App. In some cases, you didn't even need to provide your full social security number. And so people were finding ways to get these at least limited accounts open. My belief is you can kind of research something to death, but at least for me, I've always been a hands-on learner, and you just kind of have to jump in and do it in in ways where you can survive that risk to continue exploring. And I think we've done a good job at that at Stretch of sort of rapidly learning and sniffing out new opportunities.
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool. And certainly like the lesson learned if I brought it up, like needing income, right? Like I think a lot of like personal financial management apps discover like you can be so quote unquote helpful to someone, move it here, or rather like it will move the money for you to make, quote unquote a good decision. But like there is still quite a bit of income challenges. And so like an app can never solve for lack of money.
That's a great point. And I remember some early conversations we had with individuals. This one gentleman in particular, Ronnie, was sharing, after 12 years of incarceration, he was given, $50 in a bus ticket. And it just was like, I thought I misheard him. And the challenges people have to go through and kind of bounce back from those types of circumstances is, really tough to say the least. But your point is exactly right. Like there's just a lack of income, and there's a lot of great advocacy and work going on right now within the reentry space of finding ways to get people direct financial assistance upon their release from incarceration through different legislative initiatives. And I personally am in support of that in ways that are responsible with transparency and more of supportive bumpers around that different type of programming. But ultimately, people just need to find ways to make more money, and you can only do so much financial optimization and trickery. But at the end of the day, many people just need to earn more.
Keith, there's one segment on the show that I say, that's what you said. And actually, you said this to me in a story I'd written for Bankrate, but it's about the audience, which is, I think was my kicker quote. One thing we've learned about the demographic is they are very entrepreneurial and very ambitious. A lot of people just end up selling the wrong product. I just wanted to dial back into that because I know I forget when I did that story, but like Does that stand up? Does that quote stand up over time?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The entrepreneurial ambition that exists within many people who have been incarcerated is tremendous. And I stole that quote a little bit from a friend of mine, Aaron Smith, who runs Escaping the Odds podcast. And he's doing some great work now in terms of helping people launch businesses within box trucking. And there's, yeah, just, a tremendous level of entrepreneurship within that community, and would love to see more people tap into that. Of course, wouldn't advise everybody to run out and be an entrepreneur. You do need to get some footing, um, to be able to take those risks. But still to this day, I get text message from people we've worked with, showing me pictures of the box truck that they've been able to purchase now. So it's always fun to see that, and would love to see more initiatives that support entrepreneurship for people who are making that tough transition back from incarceration.
That's really cool. I want anything else you want to see, either through like fintech or through like broader from your position of like financial inclusion needs. Anything else you think that's super underserved and needs attention?
I wish I had something intelligent to say, but not really. I've just been kind of focused on this new ability to enable organizations to reward what we call progress. So anytime someone does something that is progress, how can we make it easy to move money to them in responsible ways? I think this is a really interesting area with a really large market and a variety of use cases, whether that's serving the reentry community, or serving small business lenders, or serving executors of trusts who want to include different milestone based payouts to beneficiaries. There's a lot of different use cases where we can move money to people once progress is made.
And one broad question before I take you almost to our conclusion, but I'm kind of curious on your take of banking as a service model in a post Synapse crisis. I mean, I know it's a little bit out of your element. There's a giggle, but I am kind of curious. What's the scuttlebutt here? Like, are we going to see less and less of that, or what's your take there?
Well, I think it's always been known the challenges of building a business on interchange. I understood that risk, but always thought there were pathways for us to generate revenue in on other ways. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are getting really creative these days around rewards for spending in different type of categories. I know you've had the founder from Fast and Rewards on, and we've met recently with Frida Leibowitz of Debbie. I think entrepreneurs are really smart in finding creative ways to do things around points. So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there. I think we're going to see more of these kind of middleware providers offer not just issuing services, but also acquiring. Always been super impressed with the team at High Note and what they've been able to accomplish, and seeing them now get into the acquiring side, I think is going to help them, serve obviously more use cases, but put them in a position where they'll be very durable and will be sticking around for some time, as opposed to some of these other businesses we've seen. I've experienced working with several VAS providers, a couple of which are no longer in business. So it's really tough, and I just counsel any entrepreneur to really do your diligence on who you are marrying up to in terms of your product capabilities you seek to offer.
Well, Keith, if someone wants to reach out to you to work with you or just get inside of your brain, what's the best way to reach you?
Just say Keith at stretchfinance.com.
All right, cool. Well, Keith, last question. What is the image on your phone's lock screen?
It is of my beautiful wife, Yassi,
Ah,
wearing her cowboy hat.
ah, that's so sweet. Well, Keith, thanks so much for being on Money Isn't Everything. Really appreciate you sharing and being so candid with me. So thanks for being on the show.
Thanks a lot. It's been fun.
Okay, so one thing that really struck me is how academic research definitely has its limits, and the formerly incarcerated were already finding places to plop their money, like signing up for Cash App accounts. I hope to see you 2 weeks from now because I'll be talking to a founder of a fintech that recently helped get funds to people affected by the LA fires. See you then.